Okay, then. Hot mic. We got a hot mic. Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to see you. Happy New Year. Welcome to the Sedro Woolley Rotary Club, the greatest club in the... We have an invocation by Mr. Carl today.
All right, Rotarians, let us pray. Dear God, thank you for all you provide. We love this liquid sunshine. We're a little short this year. We want it to get a little colder, so keep that in mind next week. I think it's coming. Let's be thankful for all that. We need the seasons to do what they do, and we need the nourishment of the soil and all that good stuff. And let's be thankful for the food that we have today. May it nourish us, and so that we can do good for all in the world. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And we're going back to Carl. He's got our song.
All right, let's do You're a Grand Old Flag. Kick off the new year. You're a grand old flag.
You're a high-flying flag and forever repeat. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Everyone is true. Red lions, we're a ghost or prey. All right, yeah. There is not much pep in our step this afternoon. Okay. Do we have any visiting Rotarians? How about guests of Rotarians?
Okay, there you go. Happy New Year. And I wanted to introduce my guest today, Lindy Mullen Doyle. She is our newly elected board director for Sedro Woolley School District, District 2. She was sworn in December and has been busy with attending retreats and board meetings already and deepening her learning about our district. And we're just very excited to have her.
Welcome.
Okay, Happy New Year, everybody. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce my parents. They've been visiting with us for the last 3 weeks from Albania, my mother, Tefta, and my father, Nyazi.
Welcome. Do we have any other guests? Well, welcome. So quickly, we'll go through some club business. So we have a board meeting on January 9th at 5:30 at the Janicki offices. Anyone is welcome to attend. Our next service Saturday at the Helping Hands Food Bank is going to be January 20th from 9 to 11 a.m. So if you can make it, we would love to see you out there. And then finally, this is what you guys are going to hear for the next 4.5 months. It's time to start gathering auction items. So be thinking about that. And with that said, Team July is going to meet after the meeting briefly today to start talking about our auction item. If you don't know if you're on Team July, we have some booklets down here. You can check what team you're on. Other than that, do we have any other announcements from the floor? Well, then let's move on to our raffle.
A raffle. Turn that thing on, Les. First up, we have number 21.
Hey, that's me. All right.
You want to spin the wheel? Cash, $30.
All right, that can go back into the fund.
Next up, we have number 70, 70. All right. Spin the wheel. Cash again, $25. Number 1, B1.
All right.
We're taking wine. All right. And last one we have 075, number 75. Right behind me. And some wine. Thank you.
Smart choice. Okay, Bill, it's you.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to grant immunity to 3 members of our club that have been around a while: Les Huggins, Daryl Skiles, and Don Ostrom. And before I get to the next move, that song, you guys, was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And we tried to sing it in the past, and I can't sing, and I was trying my best to push us along. So before I do the next thing, everybody who tried to sing that song and failed so miserably, pay $1, please. And okay, the next thing is that, including myself, will my PLO please stand up first of all? Thank you. PLO stands for Permanent Latrine Orderly. It's something I explained years ago. Everybody else can buy immunity for $2. So pay up, and those that don't want to pay their $2, please stand up because you're going to pay a whole lot more. Is there anybody who isn't paying the $2? Okay, happy bucks. Nobody happy? David, if you're really happy, come meet me halfway, will you?
So I'm happy that New Year's Day, I started my 39th year of clean and sober living.
I got a happy $5. Went over to Chad Paulson's house New Year's Day and did our first ever polar dip. And for all of you listening, next year we're going to expand the invite list, so just be prepared.
Anybody else?
I've got some happy bucks. I got another mic too. I won't be here next week. My happy bucks. My daughter qualified for another one of these great swim meets, and I get to go to Boise, Idaho in an ice storm next Thursday. So wish me luck. I give you money.
Right.
Okay, Madam President, I think that's it. One more? Oh, one more.
So on January 1st, my son turned 38 years old. He is the first baby born in Skagit County in 1986. And on January 2nd, my daughter turned 37. She was the third baby born the next year.
Who else? One more.
I just wanted to give you guys an update today. I'm talking to you, and I've been speaking to all the different Rotary clubs, and I just want to say this: out of all the different clubs I've spoken to in all Skagit, Whatcom, Snohomish County, you guys are the tops.
Thanks. We already knew that.
I have a couple of happy bucks. I know I see a lot of Washington gear in here, so I am happy that they won because it means we get to watch them play one more week. We're going to watch them beat Michigan, right? Yes. And I also got to spend last weekend right before New Year's with my mom and my aunts and my cousins. We went to Harrison Hot Springs in BC, and we had a wonderful time soaking in the tubs and playing games and just being silly girls. So I'm happy about that.
So Don Stryker had his hand raised. Don, did you have happy bucks? I do. I have 20 happy bucks here. I'm back in Philadelphia helping my wife care for her 90-year-old parents. And we had the opportunity this year, although we grew up here, this is the first time we ever went to the Mummers Parade. And it's interesting. Maybe you should Google it, but I am extremely happy that I no longer live here.
And I have a happy 20. I think this is the first year for my parents since they've been visiting that they had a chance to experience Christmas and New Year's American style, not Albanian style. So got the chance to take them also to the Capitol. So senators, visited the Capitol and everything. So it's been nice. Now they're leaving the bad weather behind. So.
I think I'm done.
Okay, he's done. I'm going to bring Carl up now.
It's time for early leavers, but if you leave, you're going to be missing a good show. We have, backed by popular demand, we have arguably the world's leading expert on Amelia Earhart's disappearance. He spoke to us about 4 or 5 years ago. Since then, he's done a TV show on Discovery Channel, which was the most widely watched show in the history of the Discovery Channel. History Channel, sorry, not Discovery Channel. And he has more information about this whole thing than you can imagine. And there's a new twist to it, and he's going to tell us about where he left off, where he left off last time talking to us. He'll fill in the gaps up to the present, because this story keeps evolving and it's really quite fascinating. So are you ready? Please welcome Richard or Dick Spink.
Okay, does this work? Can I get the mic on? Is this working? How about that? Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. A little bit crazy loud. Is that too? Okay. Is this okay? No? You sound like a monkey. Okay, well, how about that? Is that better? Too crazy? I gotta have my hands free so I can block stuff when you throw it at me. And you got a clicker?
Yeah, clicker's on.
Oh, clicker's up here. This one? Okay, so thanks, Carl. And thank you guys all for having me back. This is an update on everything that's happened in the last, I spoke to you 5 years ago, and that was before we did the History Channel show. This whole thing I stumbled into, and it ended up culminating with the #1 show the History Channel did. We had a media blitz for about a week and a half before we actually played the show on a Sunday night, a 2-hour special. And it was their #1 show they did for viewership. And then we were blocked by the Japanese government, and they took our ratings away from us. So we really got a black eye on it because we were too close to everything that was going on. Then we did another television show. I did an episode of Mysteries at the Museum with Don Wildman. And anyway, this whole thing is kind of going to a new phase. I've taken probably 5 years off. I haven't done a lot. But as we go, just a little bit of a background. Amelia Earhart, when she left Lae, New Guinea, she was flying 2,552 miles to Howland Island. And of course, we know she didn't make it. She did have a fallback plan, and the fallback plan was well documented. There's been a lot of people that have come up with a lot of different stories, possibilities of what have happened to her. And a lot of them are some pretty crazy ideas. And when I first got into this, I stumbled into it in the Marshall Islands when I was selling my aluminum boats. And anyway, it culminated into the whole account of what I did when I ran into the eyewitnesses that brought this whole story forward. And it started actually in 1938, less than a year after she disappeared. People started talking about what goes on. And then Fred Gorner wrote a book in the early 60s that really became quite a big deal. And anyway, Amelia making that flight, Clarence Kelly Johnson was the one, you know, the greatest aeronautical engineer of all time. He was the one that did a fuel study for Amelia Earhart that gave her a range well over the distance from Howland Island, from Lake New Guinea to Howland Island. And, what happened? I'm just going to go through this as quick as possible, just as a review, and then I'm going to tell you about what it is we're up to next. And there were over 200 eyewitnesses that saw Amelia Earhart or had firsthand evidence of her being in the Marshall Islands. And of course, the most notable, Chester Nimitz, he told Fred Gorner in 1965 in writing, you know, never give up. You're onto something that'll stagger your mind. General Alexander Vandergrift, he was a Medal of Honor recipient in 1971. He was with Fred Gorner and said that Earhart was in Saipan. And then, of course, General Graves Bierskin, he led the amphibious assault into Saipan. And during a 66 CBS interview, he said Earhart was in Saipan and she died at the hands of the Japanese. So after everything I've done, I've led 9 expeditions now to the Marshall Islands, 2 to Saipan. And with all the people and all the evidence that I have seen, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that this is really the true story of what happened to her. Robert Wallach, he was a machine gunner in the 2nd Marine Division. He was the one that found the briefcase. They were bivouacked on Saipan waiting for their next orders. He went to Guadalcanal after this, and he was the one that pulled out the briefcase, opened this briefcase, and they pulled it out of a safe, and he opened this briefcase up, and he had Amelia Earhart's passport, visas, everything she had from around the trip. And he said, you know, this is kind of strange because we were all told she ended up in the water, and none of this was water damage. Just more evidence of more people that have information about her. Biliman Amran, I stayed with his son-in-law in Jalut when I was in Jalut. Amelia Earhart, when she was picked up at Amelia Atoll, was taken, and I'm going to cover more of this to fill in the blanks because I want to try and get through this. So I'm not going to keep, get you guys bored because I could go on and on for hours about this. So I'm trying to condense it. Biliman was the medic that treated Fred Noonan for his injuries in the crash landing at Amelia Atoll. He screwed up his knee and he had a gash on the forehead. And Biliman was taken out to the ship. He was a medic, worked for a Japanese doctor on Jalut, went out and treated him. And he told the entire story, the account of Amelia being on the ship, the Koshu Maru, which is part of the whole story of Amelia being from Millie to Jalut on the way to Saipan after she was picked up. Okay, so fallback plan. During this flight, Amelia Earhart flying Lake New Guinea to Howland Island and of course on to Hawaii. The United States Navy built a little airstrip on Howland Island for her. She was very involved with FDR and this whole project of what was going on her around the world flight. Now, Eugene Vidal, if any of you saw the movie Amelia, she had an affair with Eugene Vidal. And Eugene Vidal, her being very close, he was appointed by FDR as Director of Air Commerce. And he wanted her to have a fallback plan, and this is very well documented. She was going to, if she couldn't find Howland Island, she was going to turn west and fly to the Gilbert Islands, which are under British control, and try and find a place to land. Well, we know that she was a lot further north. One of the last communications she had that was picked up by the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, which was help guiding her in, she radioed that she was under 1,000-foot overcast skies. And Fred Noonan, her navigator, was relying on celestial navigation. And so she made the line of position. We know she made it far enough, but she didn't know her north or south. One of her that radio transmission, she's flying north and south on her line of position, but under 1,000-foot overcast sky. The only place where there was overcast sky, July 2nd, 1937, was to the northwest of Howland Island. We talk all about this on the TV show. And anyway, so from that point, she also missed Dakar when she crossed the Atlantic by 150 miles to the north. So she turned around, and when she flew back, instead of flying the Gilberts, she flew back and landed at Amelia Atoll, crashed on the beach at Amelia Atoll. Some of the different people, the guy in the middle there, that's President Loke of the Marshall Islands. And I did a lot of things for there. It's not a big deal. I mean, there's only 35,000 people in the Marshall Islands. So this man is the Reverend Lajuan. His father was fishing at Amelia Atoll and actually talked to Amelia Earhart on when she landed. Him and Joro, which were two of the first accounts of seeing Amelia Earhart in the Marshall Islands. And his father, we interviewed him on the History Channel show too, and we talked to him about it. The language barrier is pretty tough because he doesn't speak any English whatsoever. And he was telling us through our translator how his father and Joro were talking to Amelia Earhart, but there was no language in between them. And they were wondering what this woman and this man are doing on this island. Anyway, that's all real well documented. Different shots of Amelia Atoll. Amelia Atoll, it's about 25 miles across. So this is one of the islands on the north side. This is where she landed. Like I said, I've led 9 expeditions in there at this point. And this island, in this area, and you can see this on Google Earth, you can zoom in on this island and you can see, as the account goes, there were 39 Marshallese men that were conscribed by the Japanese. They were told to get their sleeping mats, come to this island from the local community not too far away, and they were going to help move an airplane from the ocean side into the lagoon side. The only place that they could get a barge close enough to this island was down here where all these coral heads have been moved aside. They got a wooden barge in, sunk half of it, and they were able to get the airplane up onto the barge. The barge is then taken to the Koshu Maru, that ship. We have the logs of the Koshu Maru. We knew that it was in Jalute the second week of July in 37. And what we did, I had Parker Aerospace. They ended up funding one of my expeditions because Parker had some gauges on her airplane from the day and they wanted to do a media thing. So they funded a trip and they brought in ground penetrating radar and everything. And we picked up some metal pieces and parts that were there. And just different shots of what the island used to look like. That trail through there is where we did with ground penetrating radar. We found and we picked up some metal parts and pieces. And anyway, one of the pieces, we had several little pieces like this. A friend of mine has a Lockheed L-12, a Junior Electra, very similar to hers. The metal work was a lot the same. We had metal analysis done at some laboratories across the US, and they said, yes, this material is consistent with what would have been on our aircraft. So I've got lots of these little parts and pieces. I've got a hub off of an air wheel. She had Goodyear air wheels on her airplane, and this was one of the dust covers that came off of her aircraft. I've got that one still. We did metal analysis on all of these things. Yes, all consistent, and it fits perfect on the hub, the little dust cover. More parts and pieces that we picked up. And then of course there was all the dunnage too that's still there sitting on that island, heavy wheels that were used to move something heavy out there. A lot of people say, well, World War II, there were airplanes crashed all over. Well, in this particular region, no, it's about 20 miles away from the nearest Japanese base. So what we wanted to do, we went to one of these Japanese bases to pick up metal off of, there's airplanes, Zeros, Betty bombers, and everything that are still in the woods down there. I'll talk about this in a minute. And anyway, so we picked up different metal and had the analysis done that showed ours was not Japanese metal. Ours was consistent with what it would have been on her airplane. Okay, so how many of you did see that show of the History Channel? Any of you guys see it? It was a pretty big deal. And this was the photograph that we got. We took a black eye on. That's the ship, the Koshu Maru's in the background. On the very back of it, there's a barge with an airplane on it. And then in the foreground, if you look at this, you've got the woman sitting down with her back to the camera and the man that's standing up over here. We had this, of course, in the movie, Sean Hendry, who is the retired assistant executive director of the FBI. We brought him and Dan Hampton, an F-16 pilot. in to be our experts and the focal point of the show. I was one of the producers on the television show, and we brought those two guys in to be to put the show together and to kind of be the stars of the show. And anyway, Sean, with his connections, we had this photograph analyzed by the FBI laboratory, and they gave us a 95% accuracy or above that yes, this is Fred Noonan and that is Amelia Earhart. Some of the different things they did were analysis. The photograph from the dock is on the right and a picture of Fred Noonan on the left. And anyway, it went on and on. I mean, I could really go on and on about all the different things that truly have happened in this. Harrison Burks are two guys that were responsible. Once Amelia Earhart did die in Japanese custody, she was buried just outside of the Yonge Cemetery. And these are two guys that dug up bones for Lieutenant Griswold, who was with the Office of Naval Intelligence. That's a whole different story. I could go. That's a sidetrack I could go off on, but I'm not going to do that. Different things that were released that have been held by the National Archives. When I first went public with what I had from talking to the people in the Marshall Islands, I had everybody that was in the Amelia Earhart world contacting me, flying into the valley, because I live local here. I'm only a few miles from here. And they were flying in and talking to me about, what I had. And a lot of this information that's been released from the National Archives, there's one man who's a retired FBI agent. Of all the people that came and visited me, he was the one guy that really had the most credibility. His name's Les Kinney. He did the television show with me, and he's actually the one that dug that photograph out of the National Archives. Les, being a retired FBI agent, really knows how to write Freedom of Information Act requests, and he has over 200 Freedom of Information Act requests specifically relating to Amelia Earhart, and several that don't relate to her, trying to get in with radio transmissions, and that have been denied. 200 Freedom of Information Act requests, probably over that now, that have been denied relating to this information. So anyway, it goes on. This is just stuff out of the stuff out of the National Archives relating to Amelia Earhart, saying that she was in the vicinity of the Marshall Islands, more different records and things that go on. And then we also go into post-loss radio transmissions. And there were several post-loss radio transmissions that were very significant to this entire account of Amelia Earhart. Charlie Dominic, a good friend of mine in the Marshall Islands, he had an uncle, Tamaki, who actually worked on the Koshu Maru and backed up that entire account of Amelia Earhart being in Jalute. And oh gosh, it goes on. So this is leading us to where we're going now. Martin Daly, a very good friend of mine. I'm also a licensed Coast Guard captain, and every once in a while I'm going to run a ship for Martin. Martin has some ships. One of the ships we did the History Channel show on, and Martin is going to be involved in this next step, which I'm going to go into in a little bit, where there is one man that actually has an airplane that we're going to be going after here in the next year sometime. And anyway, Martin, he's got a resort out in the middle of, if anybody ever wants to go on a crazy vacation, it would be the best you ever had, for unlimited fishing, scuba diving. He's got a resort, a private resort out there that's just pretty awesome. And this is one of the ships, one of Martin's ships that I go out and run every once in a while. Windward, this is the one we'd actually did the History Channel show on. The reef at Millie, where she landed, it was pretty rough. It would tear the gear up pretty good. Jim Hayton, a guy that's local, rebuilds airplanes here. I took Jim on the Parker expedition out there, and we went over different things that happened with the Lockheed and how its weak points were its landing gear, and landing on something like this, even though she had the big Goodyear air wheels, it still would have really torn the airplane up a bit. Different things during the television show. As I mentioned, we did go to one of the Japanese bases, and I've also taken several trips. Matthew Arnold, a photographer, I took him out on an expedition just to photograph battlefields of the Pacific, from Saipan to Truk and Guam and then to the Marshall Islands. And, you know, all through these Japanese bases that are out in the middle of the Pacific, it's really kind of great because you got all these airplanes that are still exactly the way we left them in 1945, trees growing up through them and everything. It's really kind of strange. That's what's left of a Betty bomber, another Betty bomber. That's Les Kinney right there. He's the one that's now I still work with, doing some occasional things. Dan Hampton, we're sitting in the front of the Lockheed L-12. He is credited with saving a lot of American boys in both Gulf Wars, F-16. By any time there's an aviation accident or something, the networks usually hire him to be their investigator. And so him and Sean Henry, which has Sean Henry on the right and Dan on the left. So they were the ones that they were really instrumental in making that show as good as the show was right up until we got blocked. And different crews, how we put it together. I'm going to go through this fairly quick. Just the Japanese jail, that's where Amelia Earhart was held in Saipan. Like I said, there was 2 expeditions I led there. This happens to be that graveyard I was telling you about where the bones were dug up by Harrison Burks. Now, in the very beginning, I mentioned in 1938, less than a year after Amelia Earhart disappeared, and then I'll go into the new stuff we're doing, but there was a message in the bottle washed up on the shore of Solac, France. There was a woman out walking her dog, picked this bottle up, read this letter, and this letter said, I'm a sailor on the ship the Vivio. We ran aground in the Marshall Islands at Millie Atoll. The Japanese picked us up. They executed everyone on the ship except for me. He was a mechanic. They needed him. They took him back to Jiayu. So when I was in Jiayu, I was held in a cell. In the cell next to me was Amelia Earhart. And in the next cell was her mechanic, which would of course been her navigator, Fred Noonan. And he went on and talked about that. That was released to the public, well, not to the public, but it was taken out of the top secret files in 1985 from the National Archives. So anyway, the list of accounts of Amelia Earhart being in Japanese custody, from our photograph, from all these different things that have happened, all the guys that have been researching Amelia Earhart, the Dan Cothera group in '67, all these people that have written books about this, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Amelia Earhart was in the Marshall Islands, picked up by the Japanese and died at the hands of the Japanese in Saipan. There's just too many eyewitnesses that are involved in this whole project. And I just stumbled into it. I wasn't going out looking for it. I just stumbled into it. But anyway, 4 years before Pearl Harbor, how on earth and why is this? That's the biggest question. Why is this still being held? Why are they not releasing any of this information? And a lot of it has to do with giving FDR a black eye. He knew within 2 weeks that Amelia Earhart was in the hands of the Japanese. We knew it. And a lot of people today still want to protect his legacy. And when things are hidden and put away, as we're trying to find out by looking for Freedom of Information Act requests and being denied on all these different times that we are. And I could go in and talk about some of those different things, but I've done that enough. So this leads me to where we are now. I told myself I wasn't going to do this for very long, and then that was several years ago now. I've done that. I've been involved in this for 10 years. I told myself I was only going to do it for 5 years because Amelia Earhart has destroyed a lot of people's lives since then. They were all so close to absolutely proving this. We thought we did when we had that photograph, and everything came out against us on that. So there's another man that wrote this book. This is his second book. Bill Snavely. I met him when I was speaking in Atchison, Kansas at the Amelia Earhart Museum. And Bill Snavely has something very interesting. He has an account that has been documented of a second aircraft, another aircraft that left Lae, New Guinea several hours after Amelia Earhart flew out. This plane was very, very similar to Amelia Earhart's. There was a woman flying it. So his entire account is that that was a decoy plane that flew to the Marshall Islands to photograph Japanese military installations. And that plane, there were eyewitnesses that saw that plane as it was trying to get back to Lady Guinea that ditched off the little island country of Buka. And so he has raised some money and actually put divers down on that airplane once. It's in 105 feet of water, so it's very easy to get to. I could use one of Martin's ships, and that's what this is all about. We're going to try and lift up part of that aircraft, and because there was eyewitnesses that saw it go down, he has been working with the little government of Buka. They have given him absolute permission and for nobody else to be there. And since I have connections with the ship and Martin, I'm going to put together a little bit of an expedition to pull this plane up. Pratt & Whitney has jumped into it because they said, any engine we've ever made, we have all the serial numbers. We know exactly who it was sold to. And so we're going to go try and get that plane off the bottom and give an identification to it. So that's what my next project is. If it happens, I still have to raise some money, but it's going to be about $130,000, which there's a lot of people, like I said, Parker, they threw in close to $200,000 on that last project. So there's a lot of companies that are willing to throw money in to try and find things like that. This second plane was another plane. See, there's a lot of people that say that Amelia Earhart was secretly taking pictures of the Marshall Islands, and the Japanese were, of course, there are people who say the Japanese are accusing Amelia Earhart of being a spy. And there was a lot to that. There's a lot of accounts of that when people were chasing this story down, saying that, oh, she had different engines put on her aircraft, she had camera gear put on her aircraft, and all of that relates to this particular book saying there was actually a second aircraft that was involved that the Department of the Navy was working with to try and do this while Amelia Earhart was flying, so they could say that this was potentially Amelia Earhart. So anyway, there's an airplane. Some of the parts that we're taking off of that airplane, for example, the airplane is really, from the photographs we have, you can look it up, it's called Project Blue Angel. And the photographs that were taken, that he's taken, the aircraft is really encrusted in coral because it's only at 105 feet. And they have pulled off some of the landing lights, and the landing lights were unique to a Lockheed, like she flew. There were 150 Lockheed 10s were built, but only 15 L-10Es, which was her airplane, which had the bigger engines on it. So, and then, you know, the Japanese actually built more Lockheeds than Lockheed did. They built but it was the Super Electra, the L-14, and the Lockheed Lodestar. Hers was the L-10, which was really the first one. Clarence Kelly Johnson was the one that finished the design on that airplane when he was first cutting his teeth in the aeronautical industry. But anyway, that's where we are. That's a whole update on the whole thing. I know I've skipped over a lot of stuff because I didn't want to bore you guys and cover it all. So I'll be around for a while if anybody wants to ask any questions, or if there's any questions anybody wants to ask me right now, that'd be okay. Yes. So you say you were blocked.
So when you say you were blocked, I guess, by the Japanese, explain that a little more.
Well, they came out. There was an internet blog that was placed after we found out who it was a Japanese government employee that came out and said, we have that same photograph, and we have a copyright on that photograph in a book in our National Library from 1935, 2 years before she left. And so we went after it to find it out because our photograph was stamped from Office of Naval Intelligence. Didn't have a date on it. And so it was a scrapbook is what it was. There was photographs in that book. It was held together by string. And there was photographs in that book that were dated from 1930 to 1940. And there was no date at all on that photograph. Then there was different dates on different photographs in that scrapbook, and that's what it was. So, but it was too late. The damage was done when they came out and said that in a big publicity thing. Oh, that's all hogwash. It did its damage. We were scheduled to do 2 more specials, 2 more 2-hour specials when that hit, and then everybody ran from us. So it was bad. Anybody else?
I had the same question. So
Yes.
This is about the picture.
So, Dick, why Amelia Earhart? Why not Charles Lindbergh or somebody like that?
Why am I not doing that? Or
No,
why
did you choose? Or how did you fall into this with Amelia Earhart?
That's a good story because I was selling my boats in the Marshall Islands. I have aluminumboatkit.com online, and I was selling my boats. I was over there, and I was sitting with the president that I showed you there, Ramsey, the other guy that was on that photograph, and we're sitting around the table in Majuro, and we're talking, and we're talking about all the war relics because Majuro is quite a theater of war, and they're talking about all the different things they could do because there's still scrap iron all over from the war. And I just brought up the comment during dinner, didn't Amelia Earhart disappear in this part of the world? And there was an old guy sitting at the end of the table, an Eroge, who was a landowning king, and he said, yeah, she landed on our island and my uncle watched her for 2 days. And I started laughing at him like, yeah, right. And I got yelled at for laughing at the king. And so the next time I was down there, I took a camera and I started videotaping these guys. And it ended up, I went public with the information I had, and that's when all of these other people in the Amelia Earhart world started flying in and stand with me here in the Valley and talking about this. And that's where I met Les Kinney, who's that retired FBI agent, who's really a brilliant guy. Yes?
Why do you think that?
He's all the way back there.
Why do you think that none of the other investigators talked to the Marshallese?
Why do you think the other?
Well, it's like a big duh that you would want to talk to the Marshallese people if you were investigating Amelia Earhart, and then no one of these other teams that have researched her at nauseum had ever talked to her.
Well, none of them really, I was pretty lucky because I was there and I really got to know the Marshallese people. I mean, I travel there all the time, and it's part of their history. They have a postage stamp with Amelia Earhart on it and the Koshu ship in the background, and her and Fred Noonan are standing on an island on a postage stamp. This is part of their history. They just know she was there, and it's kind of not that big a deal to them. And again, now this is the next generation, 3 generations later, where it's just part of their history. They know it, but it's and it's the further we get away from it, the tougher it is to bring up this information, especially when it comes to those Freedom of Information Act requests. The last Freedom of Information Act request Les applied for was a man by the name of James Earl Nichols, who was an ONI officer, who was the one that was there to pick up that briefcase from Robert Wallach. And I went and interviewed his nephew in Gray Bowl, Wyoming. Before he died, he told his nephew and his brother what he did. And he told them the story, how he was there. He followed the Marines into Saipan, and his one and only job was to collect all the information he could regarding to Amelia Earhart and get it back to Washington, D.C. And there's stories like this you can't believe. They go on and go on and go on. Yeah.
What are the official reasons you're getting for the denials of the Freedom of Information request?
They don't have to give you a reason. They just say, no, they don't. And the Freedom of Information Act requests are really, really interesting because when Les applied this last one for James Earl Nichols, we even had permission of his family. We wanted his war records. And I just would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when that archivist at the National Archives, you have to specifically ask for information. And it has to be pretty specific. So Les put everything down. He'd done so many of these. And then an archivist goes in and with the clearances that they have, and it was passed up the chain, and it was denied without a reason. And the same happened with several of the radio transmissions from some of our stations. Yeah, Louis.
Dick, is there any follow-up information about the location of her remains?
No, but it was a lot of us that speculate that are into this. Amelia Earhart, once those bones were picked up, they were picked up by Lieutenant Griswold, by Harrison Burks, the two people I showed you a picture of. And those remains were taken back to the United States, according to James Earl Nichols. And when they got back to the United States, that was about the same time when Amelia Earhart's mother went from the Japanese have my daughter, to not saying anything about that time. So who knows? Those of us kind of speculate and say there was probably, they made a deal with her mom to say, listen, we'll tell you what's going on, but that's it. So, and that's all speculation. There's so many people that speculate. I try not to do it too much, but yes.
So speaking of speculation, you made mention, or you alluded to, that actually the government was using Amelia Earhart as a cover for the spine that they were actually doing on the islands. And so is there any information that was planned ahead of time, knowing that she was going to be over there, or did this all come about after she disappeared, or what?
You know, there are so many different tangents that go off exactly like that. I have purposely tried to stay on Les Kinney's path, which is, these are the facts, this is what we have, and I try not to go down those rabbit holes. There was just a book published last year called Rabbit Hole about Amelia Earhart, and that is covered actually with this guy, this Bill Snavely. He's the one, that's his account, and the only reason I've hooked up with him is because I have the ships, and I thought, okay, I'd like to take that whole theory off the table. And that's kind of why I'm doing this particular. I don't believe that airplane that's out there is Amelia Earhart's, and I have my doubts if it's actually a spy plane. It's just an airplane, and there have been several of those planes were built. Like I said, the Japanese were licensed by Lockheed in the 30s and to build Electras, and they built the Takahara Aircraft Company built 119 Lockheed L-14s, and Kawasaki built another 121 Lockheed L-14s. So and we only built 110, I believe. So they built twice as many Electras as we did. Now they're a bigger aircraft, and it doesn't seem to, the measurements don't look like that. The measurements look like it's an L-10. So, more mystery. Anyway, anybody else with anything? Well, I'll be around for a while too. You can answer some questions. I'll try and answer what I can, but I'm trying to stay kind of on the main course of what I've done for the last 10 years in this. But anyway, that's a good update. So thank you guys all very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, so before you step down, I have something for your next expedition. It's a world famous rotary pen, Sedro Woolley Rotary pen, so you can write down all your new notes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that was cool. I like a good history lesson. I would just like to say thank you to our guests. Lindy, thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you. All these parents, it's so wonderful to have you with us. Thanks for joining us today. Do we have anything else for the good of the order? Okay, it's the time you've all been waiting for then. Mr. and Mrs. Brown had two sons. One was named Mind Your Own Business, and the other was named Trouble. One day, the two boys decided to go out and play hide and seek. So Trouble hid while Mind Your Own Business counted to 100. Mind Your Own Business began looking for his brother behind garbage cans and bushes. And then he started looking in and under cars until a policeman approached him and asked, "What are you doing?" "Playing a game," the boy replied. "What's your name?" the officer questioned. "Mind Your Own Business." Furious, the policeman inquired, "Are you looking for trouble?" The boy replied, "Yes, I am."